All right, let's jump right into this explainer. I want you to picture a really intense, hypothetical scenario. Imagine you're suddenly transported back in time, about 50,000 years, and you are standing face to face with an ancient human being. Now, at a quick first glance, they're going to look pretty familiar, right? Two arms, two legs, a face, and human eyes looking right back at you. But if you stand there for just a few seconds more, you'd start to notice some things that are actually deeply unsettling.
Take a moment to really visualize this person in your mind. Their skin wouldn't look anything like ours. It would be incredibly weathered, beaten down by freezing winds and completely unforgiving sunlight. You'd notice their hands right away, rough, scarred, and heavily calloused from building shelters and crafting tools without a single modern convenience. You'd see wild hair and maybe a face carrying the actual physical scars of hunting accidents. But most notably, you'd see this intense, piercing focus in their eyes. The look of someone who lived in a world where just one minor mistake literally meant instant death.
Section 1. Face-to-face with history, surviving the unforgiving Earth.
You see, the ancient landscape was just incredibly hostile. They lacked absolutely every single safety net we have today. No hospitals, no supermarkets, no technology to shield them from extreme weather. And they shared this totally unpredictable world with giant, lethal predators. We're talking cave lions, massive wolves, enormous bears. For them, survival wasn't about comfort. The constant daily uncertainty meant survival was just about finding a reason to wake up and somehow live to see the next sunrise. Because of that brutal environment, this ancient person wouldn't look like some superhero out of a comic book, but they wouldn't look like a monster either. They were these absolutely fascinating creatures, uniquely sculpted and designed by survival itself.
Section 2. Body shaped by necessity, the physical toll of survival.
Think about the stark contrast between our lives today and theirs. Today, we are practically built for technological convenience. We spend hours sitting at desks, we rely entirely on machines to do our heavy lifting, and we are perfectly protected from extreme environments by our climate-controlled homes. But the ancient reality? It was the exact opposite. Every single day, their bodies were relentlessly tested by nature. Every daily task, walking massive distances, carrying heavy loads, hunting, gathering, it was a grueling, constant physical test dictated entirely by the wilderness.
And so, their anatomical adaptations were born out of pure, unadulterated survival. These were ancient bodies shaped by necessity. They developed denser, dramatically stronger bones and incredibly powerful muscles. And remember, they didn't get these from hitting the gym for an hour a day. They got them because staying alive was an intense, unrelenting 24/7 workout. Their shoulders and arms were visibly marked by the repetitive strain of toolmaking. Their hands were physically scarred from hunting and building. Their very bodies acted like a documentary of their daily struggles.
And when we look at specific ancient relatives, like Neanderthals, the sheer genius of their anatomy really becomes clear. They had these shorter, much more compact builds with remarkably thick bones. Why? Well, it conserved heat in freezing regions where other creatures simply froze to death. They developed stronger jaws to process tough, raw foods. Even their wider noses, which people sometimes think of as a crude feature, were actually brilliant evolutionary adaptations. They functioned like built-in humidifiers, warming freezing air before it ever hit their lungs. So these definitely weren't primitive traits. They were highly specific, absolute genius survival mechanisms.
Section 3. The true power within, the mind's arsenal.
Now, I want you to imagine something truly terrifying. A small group of early humans facing down a giant mammoth. A mammoth is several times larger than a human, equipped with immense brute strength and massive tusks that could destroy practically anything in their path. A single human standing in front of one, completely defenseless. But they didn't fight alone. They survived through brilliant strategy. First, they planned. They carefully studied animal behavior to know exactly when to strike. Second, they communicated in real time. And third, they worked together flawlessly. They realized they didn't need to be the strongest creatures on the field. They just needed to be the smartest. And this perfectly illustrates the massive evolutionary split between us and the rest of the animal kingdom. While other animals adapted physically, right? Wolves got sharp teeth, lions developed powerful claws, bears grew into sheer brute strength. But human adaptation, it was entirely mental. It was the absolute power of imagination. Where an animal saw a rock, a human could look at that same simple stone and invent a cutting tool that had never existed before. They could pick up a fallen branch and engineer a lethal spear, completely leveling the playing field in an instant.
Section 4. Changing the rules, fire, and innovation.
Harnessing a simple spark and turning it into a controlled flame was without a doubt one of humanity's greatest leaps.
It became essential protection to scare away all those giant predators we talked about. It became a tool to cook food, which made it safer and vastly more nutritious, fueling their growing brains. It offered vital light in the terrifying pitch-black night. And perhaps most importantly, it gave them warmth. Warmth that allowed humans to unlock, enter, and actually survive in freezing, previously impossible environments. They weren't just vulnerable animals anymore. They became masters of their surroundings.
They essentially transformed simple knowledge into an absolute weapon. Think about it. A failed hunt wasn't just a dead end anymore. It was a vital lesson learned for the very next attempt. A broken tool was simply an opportunity to design and engineer something better. And by sharing these lived experiences around the fire, a single child could inherit the successes, failures, and hard-earned wisdom of hundreds of ancestors before them. Passing down that generational knowledge is exactly what kept their communities alive against all odds.
Section 5. The ultimate survivors. The duality of intelligence.
Now, we do have to acknowledge a darker side to this, a real duality. The exact same brilliant minds that forged strong communities, cared deeply for their families, and created incredibly intricate cave art, well, they could just as easily turn violent. When competing for incredibly scarce food, territory, and resources, this profound human intelligence was easily weaponized against other humans. It's a duality that makes our history incredibly messy and deeply complex.
As researchers often point out, they were not monsters, and they were definitely not simple cavemen. That incredible complexity is exactly what makes them so profoundly fascinating. They were highly intelligent, deeply emotional, and fiercely creative survivors who successfully navigated what was arguably Earth's most dangerous era.
So the ultimate takeaway of this explainer is that their formidable nature didn't come from raw muscle, sharp teeth, or scary weapons. It came from their sheer, unstoppable resilience. It was their relentless, stubborn refusal to die out, even when facing impossible predators, lethal climates, and just staggering odds. Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. If our ancestors used this raw adaptability to conquer a lethal world, what will our modern minds shape next? This dangerous, beautiful adaptability transformed us from vulnerable hunters into a species that literally reshaped the entire planet. I really want you to consider what that means for our future and what incredible tools we are crafting right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and as always, keep learning.